Okay, so listen. Taylor Swift is done staying silent, and she is making that crystal clear as she steps into her bridal era. According to explosive new reports, Taylor did not just quietly distance herself from Blake Lively. She confronted her directly, removed her from the wedding guest list, and cut her out of her inner circle entirely. People don't need to bubble wrap me in their minds as much as they do. She feels like she deserves to be here. And then there was this big upheaval of, no, she doesn't. No, she doesn't. She sucks, actually. And we are not getting back together ever, ever, ever. And I just kind of apparently angrily ranted about it for a while. Taylor Swift guards her privacy like a dragon guards gold. I mean, think about it. She does not like talking about her relationships, and she absolutely does not like when people she trusts go around sharing her personal life. There's a lot of stuff that I never speak out about, right? Like, people try to provoke me all the time, right? Because it would be valuable for someone to, like, get under my skin, have me clap back, then they get, like, I don't know what, you get, like, a bunch of followers out of it. It's like, I'm not interested. Privacy is basically her first priority at this point. But that was not the case with her former bestie. As Blake Lively's reputation began to crumble under the weight of the false claims she made against Justin Baldoni, she found herself completely isolated from her social circle. The phone calls stopped coming, the dinner invitations dried up, her friends suddenly had other plans whenever Blake tried to schedule something. It was a classic case of Hollywood abandoning a sinking ship, and Blake, being the person that she is, could not handle that isolation. Reports indicate that she began using her status as Taylor's best friend in exclusive Hollywood circles to stay relevant. She started trading personal details about Taylor's upcoming wedding in exchange for social validation at private dinners and fashion events. I mean, she was literally talking about things like venue scouting, who was being invited, who was being excluded, what dates they were considering. All kinds of stuff that Taylor would absolutely lose her mind over if it got out. And guess what? Those private wedding plans actually started spreading online. Taylor, who has a meticulous team for tracing leaks, identified the perpetrator almost immediately. Blake Lively was the only person outside of her inner circle who had access to that specific information, and she had been blabbing it around town like it was nothing. This devastating breach of trust triggered the private confrontation that shattered their connection for good. Biggest pet peeve. People who mistake kindness for weakness. New details confirm that Taylor confronted Blake directly and made it unmistakably clear that what she had done was completely unacceptable. The friendship was already on shaky ground because of those leaked text messages from the Justin Baldoni lawsuit. But this, the wedding betrayal, this was the nail in the coffin. Blake had essentially crashed Taylor's plans for celebrating the most precious moment of her life in the exclusive, controlled style she had carefully planned. It isn't just Taylor who's traumatized by this. This whole situation is just as upsetting and embarrassing for Blake. I function best when I have too much on my plate. But it's what I do anyway. Now, to fully understand the depth of Taylor's fury in this entire situation, you have to understand exactly how Blake had been taking advantage of her friend's influence long before the wedding drama even exploded. Taylor Swift is deeply loyal to the people she loves. If you have followed her career at all, you already know this. When Blake Lively reached out to Taylor during the It Ends With Us production, claiming she was locked in a battle for creative control with Justin Baldoni, Taylor trusted her without hesitation. Blake did not have to work very hard to get Taylor on her side, because Taylor was not the type to doubt a friend who said they were being treated unfairly. What becomes clear looking back is that the lie Blake sold was engineered to appeal to everything Taylor stands for. Blake told Taylor that she owned a significant portion of the It Ends With Us movie rights, which was completely false. She framed her conflict with Justin Baldoni as a textbook case of a woman battling unfair creative suppression from a man who was trying to silence her voice. We have an incredible team behind us, but there's nothing I'm not involved in. Blake painted Justin as the villain in every sense of the word, and the deception did not stop there. It extended to the actual marketing of the film itself. Blake lied to both Sony Pictures and to Taylor Swift about the use of Taylor's hit song My Tears Ricochet in the movie's official trailer. She falsely assured both parties that all clearances and creative agreements had been handled. Not only that, but Blake told everyone in her circle that she was engaged in a so-called bake-off, a standard industry process where test audiences view two different edits of a film to choose the final cut. She claimed her personal edit was the official Sony version versus Justin Baldoni's cut. This was another calculated move designed to isolate Justin and position herself as the authority on the project. Blake Lively wanted her version of the movie to go into theaters, and there was a lot of drama about that. Similarly, the text messages and court documents that later emerged revealed there was no hostile workplace created by Justin Baldoni. In all of those exchanges, there is a shocking absence of any legitimate safety concerns. What the texts actually show is Blake complaining that the most offensive thing Justin did was fail to fawn over Taylor Swift's involvement in the project. It became obvious that Taylor had been manipulated into lending her name and her reputation to a legal fight that was built entirely on fabricated claims. And when she found out the truth, she was absolutely heartbroken. She had supported her friend based on a completely false set of circumstances and had no idea she was being used as a pawn in a scheme to seize creative control of a movie. You didn't see it coming? No. So, how did you find out? I found out when it was online, like when it hit the news. Nobody in your inner circle, nobody knew. And you didn't smell it? No. The entire situation escalated from a private industry dispute to a full-scale public relations disaster when the text messages between Blake and Taylor were revealed in court documents. In those chats, Blake Lively referred to Taylor Swift as her dragon. She even compared herself to the character Kelce from Game of Thrones. This reveals exactly what was going on in Blake's mind. She was not treating Taylor as a friend and equal. She was treating her as a weapon to be pointed at anyone who dared to challenge her creative authority. I can see why Taylor feels betrayed and is angry and, was distancing herself because it seemed like on the surface that Blake was using her without her knowledge, was throwing her name around, was taking advantage of their friendship and her power and her influence without Taylor's knowledge. When those texts became public, the core issue for Taylor was not even the content of the messages themselves, though those were damaging enough. The real wound was that her private conversations with a close friend had become a permanent public record. Her thoughts, her casual language, her most unguarded moments, all of it was suddenly exposed for the entire world to scrutinize and judge. This threatened the very foundation of her billion-dollar empire, the carefully cultivated reputation she had spent nearly 2 decades building. And Blake had taken that painstakingly crafted image of female empowerment, fair business practices, and genuine solidarity, and weaponized it without permission to run a smear campaign against a man who, according to the courts and the glaring absence of evidence, had done absolutely nothing wrong. She was using the power and influence of people close to her to pressure Justin and make him feel like massive industry forces were going to turn against him. While the lies about the movie production alone were more than enough to create a permanent rift, it was what Blake did next during her reputational freefall that guaranteed there was no coming back from this. And this is where things get really, really ugly. When fans turned against Blake during the press tour, when her tone-deaf interviews were getting torn apart and audiences were calling out her arrogance, Blake completely panicked. Her brand deals were tanking and her public image was in a total meltdown. She needed a lifeline, and she expected her most famous, most powerful friend to throw her one. She obviously believed Taylor would ride in like a knight in shining armor and release a big public statement defending her. But that never happened. That is precisely why Blake Lively's lawyers reportedly called Taylor Swift's representatives and demanded that Taylor issue a public statement of support following the Super Bowl. That is already an extraordinary ask, but the demand came with something far worse. It came with a threat. Blake's attorneys allegedly warned that if Taylor did not publicly validate Blake's narrative, they would leak all of their private text messages to the press. She likes to control everything so tightly, and now it's all unraveled, and she has no doubt in her team sweating this and livid about it. Blake Lively possessed nearly a decade's worth of private conversations with Taylor Swift. Text messages where they almost certainly gossiped about other celebrities, discussed deeply personal matters, and spoke freely the way that only true friends do behind closed doors. And she was reportedly prepared to release all of it publicly for no reason other than to save herself and drag Taylor down in the process. This entire plan laid bare the true nature of what their friendship actually was. It was conditional. It was transactional. It was built on Blake's expectation that Taylor would always be available as her personal attack dog whenever she needed one. And Taylor Swift does not operate that way. I guess this is one of the worst things you can do to someone you claim to be your best friend. There is no apology good enough to repair this kind of damage. I can't put up walls and not care what people think. So I have to not subject myself to things that are going to hurt my feelings. When a threat of this magnitude is directed at Taylor Swift, the response is anything but passive. And in this case, the person who moved first was her father, Scott Swift. He recognized immediately that Blake Lively was attempting to exploit his daughter's influence, and he did not hesitate. He sat down with Taylor and laid out the full picture. Blake had no real evidence against Justin Baldoni. The lawsuit was a calculated sham designed to conceal her own poor behavior and breach of contracts. Scott also made clear that the text message threat was a desperate, cornered move from someone trying to drag everyone else down with her as her world collapsed. According to reports, Scott Swift then took a step that completely sealed Blake's fate. He reached out to Justin Baldoni's legal team and informed them that Blake Lively had threatened to leak Taylor's private messages to the press unless Taylor publicly endorsed her fabricated narrative. By sharing this information with Justin Baldoni's attorneys, who are already pursuing Blake for $400 million in defamation damages, Scott Swift handed them a weapon that would shred Blake's credibility entirely in court. The message delivered to Blake Lively was unmistakable. Taylor Swift is no longer your ally. She is no longer your dragon, and she will never allow her name to be used for someone else's benefit ever again. You don't have to forgive, and you don't have to forget to move on. Taylor has a long documented history of navigating loyalty and betrayal in this industry. Over the years, she has managed fierce friendship fallouts with Katy Perry, Karlie Kloss, Kim Kardashian, and Kanye West. But here is what people need to understand about Taylor now. As she has grown and evolved, so have her tactics. When someone crosses a line with her today, she does not fight it out in public. She cuts them off. And the icing out of Blake Lively actually began long before the court documents became public. The signs were visible on social media for anyone paying close attention. The missing birthday posts became the first glaring signal. For years, Blake publicly celebrated Taylor's birthday with glowing posts on Instagram. But when Taylor's birthday arrived in December 2024, the tribute was completely absent. No post, no story, nothing. And when Blake's birthday came around months later, Taylor returned the silence. No acknowledgement whatsoever. Their online interactions went from constant mutual engagement to absolute zero. And perhaps most significantly, no words of public support came from Taylor during the entire wave of backlash over Blake's lawsuit against Justin. Blake Lively's absence from Taylor's world became the new normal. As Taylor achieved historic milestones on her Eras tour, released new music that shattered records, and elevated her relationship with Travis Kelce to a very public new level, Blake simply was not part of any of it. It really comes down to the fact that she does not feel seen within this relationship. And on some level, he doesn't either, because both of these people are essentially saying, "You don't understand where I'm coming from." When a friendship of this magnitude collapses, there is always collateral damage. And in this situation, that damage extended to their partners as well. But here's the interesting thing about Travis Kelce. For him, the end of the Taylor-Blake friendship was not a loss at all. If anything, it was an enormous relief. Travis was never personally friends with Blake Lively or Ryan Reynolds. He was only in their orbit because of his relationship with Taylor. So when Taylor's connection with them fell apart in that fiery mess, his association with them naturally dissolved as well. Everybody else, I don't give a what anybody else says. Travis was reportedly highly uncomfortable with the entire dynamic of those double dates from very early in his relationship with Taylor. Reports indicate that he felt pressured by the expectation that they would naturally bond with other famous power couples, particularly Blake and Ryan. They were frequently photographed together at high-end restaurants in New York City and in luxury NFL stadium suites, projecting this united front of A-list prestige to the world. But Travis absolutely hated it. The core of his discomfort was a deep personality clash. Travis Kelce is transparent and straightforward. He says what he means and does not play Hollywood games. He reportedly never trusted Ryan Reynolds and felt that Ryan was never genuinely being himself, that there was always a calculated angle behind everything he did. Travis wasted absolutely no time making his position known. He unfollowed Ryan Reynolds on Instagram, and Ryan, perhaps hoping to save face, continued following Travis for a period afterward, but the message had already landed loud and clear. And the fact that Travis unfollowed Ryan Reynolds kind of first was very telling to me. He's already shaded Ryan once. Everyone understood exactly what had happened. You do not have your fiancé's former best friend's husband unfollowed on social media if you are still on good terms. You do not disappear entirely from each other's public lives if everything is fine behind the scenes. And to drive the point home even further, Travis recently invited Colin Jost, who is married to Ryan Reynolds' ex-wife Scarlett Johansson, onto his podcast, making his priorities perfectly clear to anyone still paying attention. How nice is it to be the less famous person in your relationship? Huge relief. The fallout from this entire saga extends far beyond just missing a spot on a wedding guest list. Blake Lively is currently experiencing a level of Hollywood exile that very few people come back from. When you pressure the most powerful woman in the music industry and your own lies are exposed through a failed lawsuit, doors close with terrifying speed. The phone stops ringing, the invitations stop coming, and suddenly you realize that the entire network of relationships you thought you had built was never really yours to begin with. To see just how far Blake's isolation has actually reached, look no further than the Met Gala humiliation. For years, Blake Lively was essentially a fixture at the Met Gala, a celebrated co-chair alongside Ryan Reynolds back in 2022. But this year's story was drastically different. Blake Lively was not officially invited by Anna Wintour and the organizing committee. The damage to her reputation from the Baldoni lawsuit had made her a liability to the carefully managed image of the event. And Anna Wintour is not someone who tolerates that kind of risk. Yet Blake, desperate to signal to the world that she was still relevant and still held social standing, found a back channel. According to reports, she reportedly paid over $100,000 to secure access to the event. She wanted to make a grand entrance, turn heads, and prove everyone wrong. She showed up in a 2006 archival Versace gown, carrying a purse featuring paintings made by her children. But the forced glamour could not mask the cold reality of what was actually happening inside that room. While other major stars moved through the event, laughing, hugging, and photographed in large, connected groups, Blake was noticeably avoided by the vast majority of attendees. She finally managed to corner Anne Hathaway for a photograph, and fans immediately turned on Hathaway for posing with Blake, given the full weight of recent events. The backlash was so severe that it created a headache for Hathaway's entire team, and according to reports, Hathaway deeply regrets taking that single photograph. When a major A-list actress deeply regrets simply standing next to you for a photo at a party, your Hollywood currency is officially spent. Why, oh why? Every actress, singer, and model at that event, and Anne Hathaway was the only person willing to take a photo with Blake Lively. This could have gone one of two ways for Anne this morning. Either her team is kicking themselves for not telling her to not take a picture with Blake Lively. This entire situation illustrates exactly what happens when someone attempts to weaponize the peace and the reputation of Taylor Swift, a woman who did not build a billion-dollar empire by being naive or careless. She has spent nearly 2 decades constructing a brand centered on authenticity, loyalty, and an intensely personal bond with her audience. Her image is her currency. And when someone tries to spend that currency without permission, Taylor does not respond gently. She responds decisively. She is now planning what is shaping up to be the most anticipated celebrity wedding of the decade with Travis Kelce. And every single detail is being protected like classified information. The flowers, the venue, the guest list. She is not leaving anything to chance. And speaking of that guest list, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds are not on it. They have been banned, cut off, and erased from the inner circle of the most powerful woman in the music industry, as completely as if they never existed. And here is what is important to understand. This was not an impulsive decision. This was the result of a long, ugly trail of betrayal and one completely unforgivable act that destroyed a 16-year friendship in a matter of months. The confrontation Taylor had with Blake was not just an emotional outburst. It was the final verdict. And in case there is any remaining doubt, let me be clear. They will not be at that wedding. Taylor is running an incredibly tight operation because a wedding of this magnitude demands a guest list composed exclusively of people the couple trusts with their privacy, their safety, and their peace of mind. This is not an event where invitations are extended out of obligation or social custom. I think the only stressful weddings are the ones where you have a small amount and you and people are on the bubble and you have to evaluate or assess your relationship with them. Yeah, to see if they should be there. When Taylor decides who stands beside her on that day, she is making a definitive statement about who she trusts, who she loves, and who she considers family. It is the most personal decision she will ever make. And it says everything about where she truly stands with the people in her life. Taylor confronted Blake directly. That confrontation was the end game. She recognized that Blake and Ryan are precisely the type of celebrities who will exploit any situation to protect and polish their own image. They see every opportunity as a potential PR moment. And if Blake somehow found her way onto that wedding guest list, she would absolutely find a way to engineer photographs with Taylor, plant the narrative in the press that all was forgiven, and redirect the entire media story away from Taylor and Travis, and directly back toward herself and her own comeback. Taylor Swift is not going to hand Blake Lively the power to hijack the most important day of her life. She is not going to allow her to manufacture drama at the altar or steal the spotlight from what should be a pure, private, joyful celebration.